My name is Vivian Mercer. I'm 68 years old, and 3 months ago, I came within inches of dying not from illness, not from accident, but from a cup of coffee laced with poison. A cup my daughter-in-law handed to me, a cup I almost drank. But the real betrayal, it wasn't just the poison, it was the person standing beside her watching. Silent, cold, my only son Julian. People say you can't choose your family. Maybe that's true. But I never thought the same child I once held in my arms would one day look me in the eye, and quietly hope I wouldn't survive the morning. This isn't a story about wealth, though there's plenty of that. It's not just about betrayal, though that runs deep. This is a story about survival, about instincts, about refusing to die quietly when the people closest to you decide you're worth more dead than alive. And if you're thinking this sounds like something out of a movie, I wish you were right. But everything I'm about to share happened, piece by painful piece. And it all began on a Tuesday morning, with a familiar sound in the driveway and a knock I'll never forget. I live alone on a 500-acre estate in rural Virginia. Ashwood. That's what my late husband Robert named it. The house sits on land rich with natural gas and rare earth minerals, inherited through generations of hard work and harder luck. We were never flashy people, but the fortune, it was real. And so were the vultures it attracted. The estate itself is quiet now. Grand, but empty. Since Robert passed 5 years ago, the silence has grown louder, and the weight of keeping the legacy alive has fallen entirely on my shoulders. 14 rooms, crystal chandeliers, hand-carved furniture, none of it matters when you're the last one walking the halls. For decades, I worked as a prosecutor. 25 years of looking criminals in the eye and listening for lies. That job teaches you things. You start to hear the small cracks in people's voices. You start to notice what doesn't get said. I never imagined I'd have to use that experience on my own family. But I should have known. Money doesn't just change strangers. Sometimes it sharpens the hunger in the people you love most. It whispers promises to them at night, and if you're not careful, it teaches them to look at you not as blood but as an obstacle. That Tuesday morning, I was in my study reviewing quarterly earnings when I heard the familiar hum of Julian's car. A sleek black Beam. The sound used to make me smile. Now, it made me anxious. He rarely came unannounced, and never without a reason. Julian Mercer was always the kind of man people noticed. Tall, clean-cut, with the kind of charisma that got him into Ivy League schools and investor meetings without ever really earning it. He had charm, yes, but charm doesn't build anything, and charm fades fast when failure becomes a pattern. He stepped out of the car that morning looking worn not physically but in spirit. His tailored suit was wrinkled, hair a little unkempt. His eyes carried that restless energy I'd seen before, desperation trying to dress itself up as confidence. "Mom," he said, walking straight into my study without knocking, "we need to talk." He sat down across from me, hands trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. I put down my reading glasses and studied his face. Something was different this time. Not just urgency fear. "I need money," he said flatly. 100,000. There it was. Julian had pitched me many ventures before. A boutique app for rating luxury spas. A vegan snack line that never made it past the packaging stage. Every idea full of buzzwords, every failure dressed up in excuses. Each time I gave in, hoping he'd finally make it, hoping he'd grow into something stable, something real. But this time felt different, sharper, colder. He wasn't asking, he was informing. "What's the venture this time?" I asked. "A marketing platform," he said, launching into a rehearsed pitch about tech partners and projections. It sounded slick, too slick. I interrupted. "Who's your partner?" "You don't know him. He's from California," Julian said, eyes flickering away. "What's his name?" He hesitated. "Mom, that's not important. What matters is the opportunity." That moment told me everything. He was lying. I'd spent decades watching liars spin stories in courtrooms, and now my own son was spinning one right in front of me. And just like the defendants I once questioned, Julian was hiding something big. And this time it wasn't just about money, it was about survival, his or mine. 2 days later Julian returned, but he didn't come alone. His wife Samantha, or Sam, as she liked to be called, arrived with him, impeccably dressed as always. Cream-colored designer dress, flawless makeup, and the kind of posture that made every movement feel like a performance. "I hope you don't mind us dropping by," she said with a practiced smile, stepping into my kitchen like she owned it. We brought coffee. She handed me a delicate china cup. It's a special blend. Ethiopian beans with a touch of Madagascar vanilla. I thought you'd enjoy something new. The moment the aroma hit my nose, something in me pulled back. It smelled wrong. Not spoiled, not rancid, but sharp, like almonds. And beneath that, a sterile bitterness. After 3 decades of courtroom experience, I didn't need scientific proof. My body told me first. Something about this was off. I looked up, and Sam was watching me, not casually. Closely, like a hunter watching prey approach a snare. Julian lingered in the doorway, unusually quiet. He avoided my eyes, kept fiddling with his phone. His usual restless charm replaced with something darker like guilt wrapped in stillness. And in that moment, I made a decision that would save my life. While Sam turned to speak to Julian, I switched our cups. Identical mugs, smooth, white porcelain. It took less than 2 seconds. When she turned back, I raised the new cup and smiled. This is lovely. You'll have to show me the shop sometime. Sam took a sip from her own, my original, and I waited. 15 minutes later, the coughing began. At first, just a soft clearing of the throat. Then it escalated. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her breathing became shallow and strained. Something's wrong, she gasped. Julian rushed to her side, full of concern, too perfectly timed to feel real. As they scrambled to get her to the hospital, one thought echoed in my mind. That poison was meant for me. At the hospital, chaos took over. Sam was wheeled into the emergency room, her breathing shallow, her lips starting to pale. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, attaching monitors, taking blood, administering oxygen. Julian stayed close, playing the role of worried husband with chilling precision. His voice was panicked, his hands trembling slightly, but none of it felt real. It was too polished, like a man reading from a script. A young doctor, Dr. Elena Reyes, turned to me. You were with her when she started showing symptoms? Yes, I replied calmly. We were having coffee at my home. She brought it. Did you both drink from the same pot? Same pot. Same cups, I said, carefully omitting the detail that I had switched them. Dr. Reyes nodded and made a note. Minutes later, she returned with news that made the room fall silent. We found traces of cyanide in her system. This was intentional. We're required to notify the authorities. Cyanide. The word hit me like a punch to the chest. It confirmed what I had suspected and escalated everything. Then, the curtain pulled back. Sam was still weak, but her voice carried clearly across the room. She did it, she said, pointing directly at me. Vivian poisoned my coffee. She tried to kill me. I felt the sting of betrayal tighten around my throat. She was trying to frame me. Julian stood frozen. That's impossible, he said, too slowly. Mom would never, but his voice cracked with hesitation. She gave me the cup, Sam insisted. She watched me drink it. And just like that, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the suspect. I could see it in the eyes of the medical staff, in Dr. Rhee's clipped tone, in the way Julian shifted his weight like he was calculating his next move. I had spent my life building a legacy of family, a career, a reputation, and now, with 1 cup of coffee, it was all under threat. And the worst part. The trap was working exactly as they planned. Within hours, detectives arrived at the hospital. Leading them was Detective James Rowland, early 40s, sharp eyes, quiet confidence. The kind of man who didn't jump to conclusions, but once he made them, didn't back down easily. Mrs. Mercer, he said, you're not under arrest, but we need to ask you a few questions. We moved to a small consultation room, sterile, windowless. I'd conducted countless interviews in rooms just like it, but never as the one being questioned. I explained everything, the strange smell of the coffee, my instinct to switch cups, Sam's reaction. I kept it factual, neutral, just like I taught witnesses to testify. Detective Rowland listened carefully, taking notes, asking about motives, relationships, recent tensions. Then came the part one hadn't anticipated. We conducted a preliminary search of your home, he said. We found a glass vial in the guest bathroom. It contained traces of cyanide. Next to it was a handwritten note, dosage amounts, Sam's name, and handwriting that appears to be yours. My breath caught. I hadn't written any note. I hadn't seen that vial before in my life. But I knew how it looked. I'd spent too many years in courtrooms to pretend otherwise. Are you saying someone planted it? Rowland asked. I'm saying I never saw that note before, I replied evenly. Then came the real twist. Your son Julian returned to your house earlier today to gather his wife's belongings. He was alone for nearly 2 hours. The implication was clear. Julian had access. Julian had motive. But suggesting my own son planted evidence to frame me. Even to myself, it sounded insane. Later, through the thin walls of the consultation room, I overheard Julian giving his own statement. My mom's been different lately, he said. More paranoid, accusing people of things. She thinks everyone's after her money. The words cut deeper than I expected. She doesn't trust Sam. Thinks she's a gold digger. She's been talking about changing her will. Each word painted a picture. A wealthy, aging woman losing her grip. A controlling mother afraid of losing power. A jealous, unstable widow who maybe snapped. When Rowland came back into the room, his tone had shifted. Professional distance now replaced his earlier courtesy. Mrs. Mercer, we're going to need to examine your devices and your safe. We'll also need you to remain in town. I nodded. Calm on the outside, but inside I felt it. I was being erased, rewritten, and my own son was holding the pen. That night I called the only person I trusted with my life, David McAllister. Former prosecutor, longtime friend, and one of the sharpest minds I've ever worked with. He listened without interrupting, just like he used to during case reviews decades ago. This isn't just an attempted murder, he said when I finished. It's a setup. A calculated, strategic takedown. He insisted I get legal defense immediately and connected me with Ethan Granger, a criminal defense attorney with the patience of a monk and the instincts of a hunter. Ethan arrived at my house the next morning, eyes already scanning for legal landmines. They're going to build a narrative, Ethan warned, that you're controlling, unstable, dangerous, but we have a chance if we get ahead of them. And so began the investigation, quiet, precise, ruthless. Within days, David uncovered what I'd feared. Julian was drowning in debt, over $300,000 to loan sharks, casinos, and off-the-book investors. The kind of people who don't send reminders, they send warnings. The money he asked for wasn't for a business, it was to stay alive. But the real breakthrough came when David looked deeper into Sam. Her real name, Melissa Duval. Her history, chilling? Multiple aliases. 3 states. A sealed case in Arizona involving the suspicious death of an elderly man, her husband, who had recently changed his will to name her sole beneficiary. She had vanished after that. Reinvented herself as Sam Carter. Targeted Julian. Married him within 6 months. She wasn't just manipulative. She was a professional predator. Charming, cold, and utterly calculated. She's done this before, Ethan said grimly, but this time she overplayed her hand. It all made sense. Julian needed money. Melissa saw an opportunity. They would poison me, frame me for a botched attempt to kill her, and let the law and media do the rest. I'd be disgraced, maybe imprisoned, and when I was gone, whether by conviction or heartbreak, the inheritance would fall back into Julian's hands. They knew I had changed my will 3 months prior, redirecting most of my estate into a charitable foundation, but if I was declared mentally incompetent or involved in criminal acts that could be challenged. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were trying to erase me completely. But they made one mistake, they left me breathing. I had 2 options, hide and hope the system would save me, or fight the way I had for decades with strategy, patience and precision. I chose to fight. Ethan, David, and I devised a plan. We would feed them a story, a small leak to the press, just enough to plant a seed of panic. The leak said I had evidence. Something solid. A document. A recording, maybe even a confession that could exonerate me and expose them both. The bait was irresistible. We circulated the rumor quietly. Through friends of friends, sympathetic reporters, and a few well-placed whispers on social media. Vivian Mercer has proof, they said. She's planning to turn it over in 48 hours. That was the hook. Then we waited. I stayed at Ashwood. I refused to leave. The FBI was informed and agreed to help, given Melissa Duval's interstate record and open federal investigations. They set up surveillance, tapped key entry points, and placed silent agents in nearby woods. I wore a wire. The hardest part wasn't the fear. It was pretending to be normal. Pretending I was vulnerable. Pretending I didn't know they were coming. 3 days later, they arrived. It was just past 2 a.m. when motion sensors picked up movement near the back patio. Julian came first, moving through the garden like he used to as a child. Except now he wasn't looking for frogs or fireflies. He was looking for a way in. Melissa followed, dressed in black, carrying a small bag. They knew exactly where to go. The study, my safe, my desk. The search was quiet, methodical, rehearsed. When they didn't find what they came for, they whispered furiously, then came for me. I was sitting in the same chair Julian had once begged me for money in. He stepped in first. "Mom," he said, voice low, "we need that evidence." "I told the press I had it," I said softly, "but I don't." Melissa raised a syringe. "Then we can't take any chances." And that's when the agents moved. Doors slammed open. Flashlights burst. FBI agents shouted commands. Julian dropped to the floor. Melissa tried to run, then lunged at me with the syringe before being tackled hard to the ground. It was over in seconds. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at the two people I had once called family. They hadn't come for the truth. They had come to finish the job. The trial didn't take long. Melissa Duval, or rather, the woman once known as Sam Carter, was charged with attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy across multiple states. Her fingerprints, her voice on the recording, and the cyanide in her bag painted a picture even the best defense couldn't distort. She received 4 consecutive life sentences. Julian, my son, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. The prosecution had more than enough to bury him, but he took a deal in exchange for a reduced sentence, 25 years in federal prison. I was in the courtroom the day they took him away. He turned to look at me, perhaps expecting a final word, maybe even forgiveness, but I gave him nothing, no nod, no tears, just silence. The media changed their tone quickly. Headlines shifted from wealthy Harris accused to mother outsmarts con artists. Book deals, documentaries, TV interviews, they all came knocking. I declined them all. Some stories aren't for entertainment, some wounds aren't meant to be reopened for ratings. Instead, I focused on rebuilding what mattered: peace, safety, and purpose. The Mercer Foundation would receive every cent of my estate, supporting causes that mattered: animal welfare, legal aid for seniors, and scholarships for underprivileged students. Julian would inherit nothing. But he would have a legacy, one carved in betrayal and shame. And me? I was still here. Still breathing. Still watching the sunrise from the same window. Not broken. Not bitter. But changed. Because when your own blood tries to destroy you, survival becomes a quiet kind of revenge. One you savor every single day. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not every story ends with justice. Mine almost didn't. But I'm sharing it for anyone who's ever felt betrayed by the people they trusted most, for those who've been manipulated, silenced, or underestimated. Trust your instincts, protect your peace, and never apologize for surviving. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Because here on The Art of Revenge, we don't just tell stories. We remember who we are, and we never go quietly. I invited my son and his wife for Christmas dinner, just the two of them, nothing fancy.